Biorhythms. I'm Terrence Alfred Anderson. We're back at the Dream City University for the third and final time, bringing you some very special, extraordinary guests. Biorhythms is brought to you by the New Journal and Guide and executive publisher Brenda H. Andrews. I'm so very pleased and delighted to introduce you to a friend of mine, someone that I've known for over 30 years, an extraordinary writer, a playwright, a screenwriter, and a producer, Mr. Clyde Santana. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, it's good to be here with you. I guess we do have a history, don't we?
Yeah, we do. That's 30 years worth.
30 years, yeah.
That's a long time.
1984 or 85 when I met you, somewhere back
Yeah,
there.
but we were only like 12 and 13 at the time.
Yeah, we stayed young. You know what? We are. We're getting younger.
So this is, of course, Biorhythms. We paint biographical portraits of area notables, and you certainly qualify in that area. But as we are doing biographical portraits, let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Where are you from? Where were you born?
I was born in New York City in a project named Queensbridge.
Queensbridge, New York City.
Queensbridge, right on the East River. Had about 3,800 family units, about 13,000 people living in that large, one of the largest projects in the country.
What was it like for you in high school and so forth? Did you have any interest in the arts?
Not in the arts, really. It wasn't until my senior year. I had wandered by, I was injured. I was running a little bit of track, and I wandered by.
You ran track.
It wasn't a really fast run. I just enjoyed track. But I was wandering by the art studio, one of the arts, and I saw this guy, as Mr. Howard Yockett was an art teacher at Long Island City High School, and I looked in, and he was chipping away at marble. And I kind of looked at him, and he said, "Would you like to try?" And I said, just kind of shook my head for a second. And then he said, "Well, we start with clay." He said, do you think you could do this?
And this was sculpting.
This was sculpting. That's, of course, my little brash behind said, "Yeah, I can do it." Little hood, you know.
Okay, so this is in high school, and you went away to college to Springfield College.
Yes, I did.
Springfield, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And when I got up there, I was first a phys ed major. And I was in the work-study program. I happened to be working over in the art department. So I saw some people doing artwork, and I said, "Oh, I can do that." And the art professor, who was the chairman of the art department, Bill Blizzard, he looked over and he said, "Oh, you can do that?" And so I grabbed some clay and I started playing with it. And I remember the first thing I did was I sat and did a sculpture of one of the art students, her face. And he said, "You really could." And so after that, he talked me into joining the art department, because it was a new art department. It was called Art and Urban Life. And,
Art and Urban Life.
Art and Urban Life, yeah. Springfield had an interesting history. When I got up there today, I just finished a black student takeover of the administration building to get more black students. And of course, it was this was 1969, the fall of 1969. We were right in the middle of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And of course, they had a very active African-American student organization, and there was some progressive, people up there that were really doing some things. And so I ended up going to that school, and as a result, I began to they started asking me, "Well, since you're an artist, you should be able to paint." Well, of course, I wasn't a painter. I was a sculptor. So, of course, now they had approached the administration and said, "Look, we want a black cultural center." Of course, now this big black culture, the House of Montu, comes up, and the next thing they're saying is, "We want a mural on the outside." So I go to Bill Blizzard and I said, "Bill, I don't have any paint." I said, "How am I going to paint it? Number one. Number two, I'm not a painter." He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You can do it." And of course, it was this fall of 1971. I started coming up with designs, and we started working on it, and I painted it, and I finished it in the early spring of 1972, and that began the murals.
This was a mural that you entitled for?
I titled it after the book by Claude Brown, Man, Child, and the Promised Land. And really, it was a summation. I had like all these. It was really a crude-looking thing that I did, because remember, I was only 19, 20 years old when I started painting these things, and but that was the way it was during that movement time. Most of us were all young. And so, I did the painting, I did the designs, and I said, and it became the wall, and then from there we painted the inside because the students wanted a nice place where they could meet and have poetry readings, and if they wanted to have dances or get-togethers or recitals, they wanted inside. So next thing they asked me was, paint the inside. Well, this is 60 feet. So here I am, and we've only got like 4 or 5 days, and of course, the first paint we used was latex wall paint, not fine arts paint, but latex wall paint.
That must have been interesting.
Yeah, because it dripped all over the place.
Right,
you know, when you hit it on the wall,
Right.
it went down.
Right.
But we got it done, and it was really, you know, and I guess it was the times and the energy, and we had to, and during those days, we wanted to make an expression. And so that began the mural movement for me in the community arts, and from there on in, I started doing more murals. And when I went to graduate school, and I've ran into a professor, Nelson Stevens, and of course, Lionel Gongora, and the murals, we did some more on the Nelson Stevens, and
No,
just
you
kept
mentioned
going.
graduate school. This was at University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
Yeah, University of Massachusetts Amherst.
Okay.
And that was actually the art professor that was the chairman of the Springfield College Art Department. He said, I was getting ready to leave college in terms of, you know, 4 years, I'm finished, I'm in debt now, it's time for me to leave.
Right.
And he says, no, it's not time, you need to go out and get some more education. Let me see how I can do this. And I don't know what he did, but he worked out, and he told me to apply for University of Massachusetts,
Right.
and he somehow worked out a deal. Bill Blizzard was a deal maker. And I mean, and he told me, he said, go up there and you need to meet with these people, and we're gonna figure out how to get you into graduate school. And the next thing I knew, I was accepted in to UMass Amherst, and I was first in the Foundry, actually, because they knew more about my sculpture. And so I was casting bronze work early in my.
Let me shift gears on you a little bit here, because I want to talk about something else that was an eventful time, an eventful moment in your life that also dealt with the art, and it afforded you introduction to a beautiful woman by the name of Gail Davis. How did that come into being? Your wife.
Yeah, she was a graduate student, and this is really funny, but actually she was putting, I didn't know her really. She was putting together a show, an art show. And somebody had told her that I was a painter and I had some paintings. Well, during that time, I was going through some really rough times with the chairman of the art department, because he was really preparing me as a graduate student. To really get out there and do some really good work. So he had told me, well, look, you know, you need to think about leaving and find another way to do what you're doing. And George Wardlaw was one of these guys that he had exhibited in the New York museums and galleries, the top ones. Mm-hmm. And so but he would come, he was on sabbatical during that time, and he would come to my studio at the New Africa House and sit down with me and talk to me. Then I had another person, Nelson Stevens, who was talking to me at that same time. So, you know, it was kind of, I was searching for something, and of course, here came Gail, who was asking me for paintings, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I gotta finish up an MFA show in about a year, please. And so she never got him. And of course,
but she got you.
Well, yeah, I guess she got stuck with me.
You know, and you guys have been writing partners, and I want to talk about that because in a moment we're going to take a look at a project, Welcome Home, Daddy Seal, and I'm going to have you set that up. But let's talk a little bit about your writing before we get to that point. You transitioned from doing murals to writing.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Sonia Sanchez earlier when we were talking.
Yeah, Sonia was my first writing teacher. Mm-hmm. And I met her at the County Color Library, and she taught me how to do poetry. And, you know, and that's basically, and then I saw her again at UMass, and we did some really great things during that time.
And you and Gail have written plays together. What have you done? What have you written?
We've written several screenplays, stage plays, several musicals. A couple of them have been produced in Equity in Philadelphia. Done a bunch of them in Norfolk, Virginia. So it's really.
Well, we're going to talk some more about these plays. But right now, let's take a look at Welcome Home, Daddy Seal. Can you set it up for us very quickly?
Yeah, Welcome Home is let's say this: it's a Navy SEAL coming home. He's been a hero over in Afghanistan, Iraq. He finds out he has a 9-year-old daughter that he didn't even know he had, and she's an incorrigible little kid. But she has nowhere to go because her mother is in jail. And so he has to take, and will she change him or will he change her?
All right, so let's take a look at that now.
Now, who's responsible for this child today?
I am, Your Honor.
Her real father, while living the good life in his beachfront home, while this poor, misguided child has been raising herself in the streets.
Okay. Be seated, be seated.
Look, word of advice, plead guilty and get her out of here before she ticks the judge off again.
The child needs a stable home, which the mother cannot do since she's incarcerated.
She's a political prisoner.
Of what? A bad choice of boyfriend? You sure that this Navy SEAL, Master Chief, is the father?
His name is on the birth certificate, and he's an expert in anti-terrorist tactics.
A whole lot of years have passed by.
Her mother never told me.
It's not the sort of thing you keep quiet. Ms. McDuffie, do we have any civil unions, any common law agreements, applications for marriage?
We have the Norfolk court records to prove that he was married to the mother at the time of conception.
And where's the mother now?
Still in jail for cashing bad checks with the fake father, Pookie Johnson.
Don't I get to say something?
Only if it's in proper English.
My daddy is the man I lived with all my life.
Well, that was the first mistake. So where were you when this child was born?
Deployed, Your Honor.
And stayed missing in action for 8 years?
Her mother didn't tell me.
And your point is what?
I guess I upset Taquanda when I re-enlisted before I told her. She never liked being left alone.
Well, that was one night that she wasn't alone.
Oh, man, that looks like a very interesting piece. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And actually, one of the people from Dream City University, Cadence, Majesty brought her. We found her through Sylvia Hudson, and great little talent. I mean, she's in her own little world, and probably going to be a great actress.
Fantastic. So you and Gail wrote this piece as well?
Yeah, Gail, myself, a brother from Marcus Ely from California, and Hunter Thomas helped us with the first script.
Yeah, I know Hunter. Okay. So again, your writing collaboration with Gail goes back to the Negro Ensemble Company. That sounds exciting. Tell us about that.
Well, about 1977, we were starting to, Gail and I were writing, we wanted to write stories. And so in 1978, we were looking for places, and we found a couple of places that we could go to in New York City. And at the time I was working in New Jersey and she was working in New Jersey too. So we said, let's go over to New York. And we went to actually several different places. We went to the Negro Ensemble Company, and we went to the New Federal, and we also went to the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center. But what was interesting about the Negro Ensemble was Steve Carter.
Yes, and then when you and I, we brought Steve Carter in town
Yes,
back in the
we
days
did.
of On Cue, again, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, he's 85 years old now.
Incredible.
And just a great man. I mean, I
Indeed.
remember just working with him was like, he was very nurturing, but he knew theater. He was like our Tennessee
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
And this man, I mean, if you didn't know who he was, he wouldn't say anything. People would walk in, they were looking for the playwright, and they were like, well, if you see him, tell me which one is Steve Carter. And he'd say, I'll tell him when he gets here. And then all of a sudden he steps up, and here's this off-Broadway playwright who's been an Obie Award winner, who's standing up there and he's saying, welcome, and we'll study some plays and we'll figure out, and he would just.
And
he
this
was-
is at the NEC.
Yes, and the
Okay,
NEC was
Ensemble
great.
Company.
I mean, what was great about it was because they nurtured you as a playwright, and then they developed your work, through a series of readings. And during those days when they would have people like Francis Foster, Gloria Foster, Adolph Caesar. I remember we had
Yeah.
Adolph Caesar reading in our play, Reginald Vell Johnson. I mean, Laurie Hayes. I mean, all these folks that had acted in the Negro Ensemble would come back and give back.
So you had all of those people reading your work.
Oh, we had.
Sam Mudd Williams, Reginald Bell
Right.
Johnson, Adolph Caesar.
And these were the people and people like Ramona King and Charlie
Yes,
Fuller and all.
yes.
They were all in the workshops. These were people that were coming in and out, and Steve was working with them, and Doug Turner,
Douglas Turner
Ward
Ward,
was working with them, the founder. I mean, they were just great people. It was a time in New York, and this was where you had to go. It was either Woody King, if you were
And
African
Woody
American.
King was at the New Federal.
Yeah, if you were African American, you either went to Woody King, you went to, Fred Hudson, or you went to Douglas Turner Ward and Steve Carter, because that's where you could hone your craft.
With all of these plays that we're talking about, let's talk about a couple of them. Let's talk about perhaps a couple of your favorites, and just give us some storylines and how they came into being, the plays.
You're talking about my place?
Yes, yeah, yes.
Well, I think the one that really started us was Gail and I was Phantom of the
Phantom,
87.
yeah.
It wasn't our first play. Actually, our first play was Night of the Wizard, which later became a piece that we're working on called Angels in Hip Hop Land.
Okay.
Okay, but and we did a piece called The Way with the Youth Entertainment Studio, which we really had a lot of fun doing. And they did it over in Chesapeake with the kids and some young and some adult actors, and everybody came from the community. And what was beautiful about it was about our story. And one of the things Gail and I have always wanted to do was always write for our children, write for African American actresses and actors, so they'd feel that this role was written for them, nobody else. And so back to Phantom. Phantom
Right.
was an interesting one because Phantom started, I used to coach kids track. And I was down in Asbury Park, and actually I was in Lakewood, not Asbury Park. But this kid, he jumped on the bus, little 11-year-old, he jumped on the bus. He wasn't a part of their team, but he jumped on the bus, and we were down in Lakewood, New Jersey, in this really ritzy track. This was a really posh place, and folk were really well-dressed. And this kid, what he was doing was he was jumping in behind the runners just to see if he could stay behind them and see how far he could prove to himself that he could run. So I went up to him and I was talking to him for a little while, and I said, well, have you ever run a race? He said, no. He said, I never finished one because he couldn't afford it. So I bought him 2 entry fees, one for the 800 meters and one for the mile. We pinned his little numbers on his back, and my team, and one of the guys, T, he had a couple extra shirts, so he gave him one. I didn't even know he had those shirts, but he gave him one of the shirts anyway. And so the kid lined up on the line with all these other 11-year-olds, and most of them were all taller than him. And it was probably about 25 of them when it started in the half mile. And the gun went off, and he falls over and trips over one of them. And I'm looking at him, and my whole team is looking at him, and he's 40, 50 yards behind by the time he gets up. Well, I'm saying to myself, wow, this kid is over for him.
Right.
And all of a sudden I see one of my runners, one of the kids that when I first started with him, he got thrown off his junior high school team, so he came to the park, and now he was one of the finalists for the Hershey National 100-yard dash, and when he flew out, and he's running around the circle, man, get up, come on, you can get up, you can win it, you can get up. He runs, I had never seen T run any further than a 220-yard dash at 13 years old. That's what he competed in, the 100 and the 200. Well, T has gone past the 220. He's still yelling to this kid. The infield, and right now all the judges are looking at him like, what in the world is going on? Right. He's 330, 440. He's passing the 440 to 550. In the meanwhile, my other runners, Rico and JoJo Baltimore and Carl, they're all running with him, talking about, you can still connect. And I'm watching this kid, this little 11-year-old kid, cut the distance down. And I see him on the backstretch. And he's coming down the backstretch. And I'm saying to myself, this kid who has some cut down shorts and didn't even have track sneakers when he went there, is going to possibly catch some of these runners. And I'm watching him all the way. And meanwhile, my team is going, it's ecstatic there. Yeah, they're going crazy.
Right, right.
And he's coming down that finish line. And it's neck and neck with 2 or 3 of the runners. And he surges ahead of them at the finish line and wins.
So how does this work into the story?
It begins, what happened is he runs the mile and he does the same thing, but this time he wins by 100. He doesn't fall, he wins by over 100 yards. And he sat down with him, he says to me, you know, you can take my medals. And I said, no, they're yours, you won them. But I'm sitting down with a piece of paper in my hand and I started writing. I said, this is what it's about, kids. And I said, and I started writing about the story. Can you want to win really bad? Better than anybody else can. Can you want to win over one and tell the winners, hey, what a winner? Can you make a penny into a dime and make a miracle out of an ordinary line and go beyond, be remembered for all time and be the first to be at the finish line? If you had to run in real old shoes, could you want to run faster than anybody else do? If you had to cut down real old shorts, could you want to finish first more, of course? Can you make a nickel into a dollar, buy silver moonbeams for half price and give them to the foulers? In spite of rocks and glass all over your track, you cross the finish line in first, at last, spread a little winning on the right track. Nothing more than confidence, of course. And it began.
Now, this was a song?
This was the rap that went into the
rap,
play.
okay.
But it began. What would happen if a creature who was a ghost came to the playground where kids gave up and taught them how to win? Kids like our kids.
Yes. Yes.
Who basically, they were just, kids that just grew up on their own.
Yes.
And so the phantom was that individual. It was that spirit that came to the playground. And he disappeared at the moment of try. And after that, because I had been with the New Jersey Arts Council and I had learned, and now the job was over, and I had been gone for a couple of years, I got back with some of the guys and we were writing music. And of course, we started putting together some of the tunes and I started humming them because I had played a horn when I was a kid, and my mother was a piano player. So she would help me to figure out some of the tunes that were in my head. And I'd start, okay, this one goes this way and this one goes this way. And so Gail and I would sit there and we were crafting this piece out. And it was really amazing because what was happening was we were starting to look at a character, a spirit of an old dead slave coming through the Middle Passage, drowning, but God gave a second chance to. And he told him, in every playground where there is turmoil, if one kid has a wish, you appear, and you only stay there until you teach that group of kids the moment of try, and you cannot stop until
Fantastic story. Fantastic story.
every playground in the world is peace.
And you've done quite a bit, Clyde. You've been a muralist, a sculptor, which I didn't know, a screenwriter, playwright. You just have a whole lot going on. I want to thank you so very much for taking time out of that busy schedule of yours. I know you're retired, but you're the busiest retired person I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for joining us for the 5th edition of Biorhythms. Stay tuned. Tell all of your friends. We're going to be doing a whole lot more. My name is Terrence Affer Anderson, and this has been Biorhythms.